Good evening to all of you. Today we are going to review this book Think Again by Adam Grant. Let me start with a brief background about the author. Adam Grant is a professor at Wharton School. It is a Ivy League university of Pennsylvania, and he is a leading expert in a lot of psychology related study on motivation, meaning, rethinking, and all that. And his books have become so famous, and they all are New York bestseller. The first one was Give and Take. There is a book, and then he wrote the book Originals. Then recent book he written was Hidden Potential. So this is a background about the author, and he is a very passionate professor and also a lifelong learner. And his takeaway message about rethinking process is what we are going to learn today from the book Think Again. And I would like to read out the review given by Daniel Kahneman. So this is the book Think Again by Adam Grant. So let me read out the review by Daniel Kahneman. Adam Grant believes that keeping an open mind is a teachable skill, and no one could teach this hugely valuable skill better than he does in this wonderful read. The striking insights of this brilliant book are guaranteed to make you rethink your opinion and your most important decisions. So, this is the review he has given. So, basically, the author teaches us to rethink, and he also teaches us to open our mind, have an open mind. Let's get started into the book. Moving to the first chapter, he talks about the ways we think. There are four different ways in which we can think. We can think like a preacher, prosecutor, politician, or scientist. Preacher is someone who believes in something and he is trying to preach his idea to the people, who wants to convince his beliefs to the people. Prosecutor is someone who wants to make sure the other person is wrong to win the argument. He wants to bring in all the evidence to ensure he makes sure you get it corrected. So he always says you are wrong. So that is the way how we think in a prosecutor mode. Politician is someone who thinks like we are always right and the opponent is always wrong. Opposition party is always wrong. So that is the way generally the politicians think, right? So same way like we can also go into that mode of thinking in a politician way. We are right, the other person is wrong. Coming to the scientist mode of thinking, it is where we are trying to look for the things that we don't know, where we can go wrong, and looking at the evidence to go little closer to what is truth. That is a way to think in a scientist mode. This particular pyramid will give us a very good uh, clarity on what the author is saying here. A cult leader, the bottom of the pyramid, you can see cult leader thinks he is always right. Coming to the politician, those are the one who say we are right, they are wrong. Coming to the preacher, saying I am right and I am trying to preach my message. The other one is the prosecutor who is finding evidence and everything, details and the points which he can say to convince you that you are wrong. And finally, the scientist way of thinking, where I think in a way where I'm open and I say that I might be wrong, I might be missing out something. So that is the mode where we can think like a scientist. These are the modes of thinking, and the importance of learning the scientist mode of thinking is what we are trying to learn here. It is more than just reacting like we are having an open mind. It is actually being actively opening our mind to go and see for the evidence that what we already believe in might be wrong, or what we know already might be wrong, or we are missing out some information. So that is what he is trying to convey here, and it requires search for reasons. It requires us to openly go and search for reasons why we might be wrong. It is very difficult, and that's the reason why it's difficult. And just believe, just think about this situation when we are discussing about some topic, and somebody is bringing a point that doesn't resonate with our belief, then we get so offended, or like sometimes we feel so bad when our beliefs are being put forth by another opposing point of view, or some opposing view of belief. So that is very difficult. That's why it's very difficult to be in the scientist mode of thinking, because we naturally tend to have a bias called confirmation bias, where we want to look for details which already what we believe in, we want to believe it more strongly, so we look for only those details, those things out there, and we will make sure that we get convinced with our own beliefs. That's the way we all think. We have learned to think that way, but it's very hard to move to a mode of thinking in a scientist mode of thinking, where going and searching out the reasons why we might be wrong, and we will be able and being open to revising our own views based on what we see, learn something new, based on the new things that we learn, able to revising our own views. Okay, so now going to the next slide, let's take few situation to learn this more better. In a preacher mode, changing our mind might seem like a moral weakness. It's kind of like a sign of a moral weakness. But in scientist mode, it feels like more like an intellectual integrity, where when we know something, when we are changing our mind, it is something aligned to the evidence that we see, and we are changing our and we are trying to go closer to the truth. So in a prosecutor mode, allowing ourselves to be persuaded is called like accepting the defeat. Just we are admitting our defeat. But in scientist mode, it is something like we are stepping towards the truth. Okay, something which we did not know and we are trying to know. And that is something we call stepping towards the truth, which is which will bring us to the knowledge that we are missing currently. And the other thing, the third example I could say is in politician mode. Sometimes we flip flop our responses in a carrot stick mode. Like when we say something, and when something gets received well by people, we get a very good response. Sometimes we might end up changing, flipping and flopping our statements based on that reward we get. But in scientist mode, it is purely based on the data, what we fact, the actual truth or the data, and the sharper logic. Based on the logic, we shift our mind based on that. So that is the difference between the other mode of thinking and the scientist mode of thinking. Moving to some example from the business world. Let's take up this particular survey. Let's look at this survey regarding the success of startup. They took a small survey on the how the success of startup, how who succeeds when they do a startup and what kind of mindset they have. When they looked at the entrepreneurs, they had the scientific thinking and they had the approach of experimenting and then implementing, and instead of just believing in something and going with it, experimenting it and then implementing the ideas. And one example I would like to quote here is, he relates this to another topic where when we are trying to do some work, maybe like we are doing a research paper or we are trying to do some work in any of our field, he's asking us to keep multiple version, like work on one version, then again do a revision, do a revision, do a revision, and also have a set of team or a set of uh, people who can review our work and give us feedback and in each version. So this is something closely ties to the idea of experimenting things, like you're experimenting and then you're getting some feedback and then you're improvising, having multiple drafts. So that idea also is very strong idea which we can take it back to implement in our own real life scenarios. Coming back to this point, I got a little deviated with that, but coming back to this point of startup, the companies which had the scientific thinking, we went in the mode of experimenting and implementing, they were more successful. So this is like some statistics based on a small survey. And author also says this, like, we always admire the leaders because they are very decisive, they are clear with this is going to be a success. So we see like leaders are so decisive, decisive, and they are so convicted with their idea, and this is going to be a success. But the author says the reality might be different. Even the leaders who are innovating so much every day, they also have this uncertain thing in their mind. Like they also are unsure. They're not that so certain. That's why they always go experimenting and changing and going in an experimental mode and having that open mind that this there is a little bit of uncertainty as well, not just like purely going with 100% confidence. Sometimes there is a little bit of space for the doubt whether it will go fine. And let's take one very interesting business examples which we all can relate to, each and every one of us can relate to because we have seen this trend in our life. Mike Lazardis, he was the co-founder of BlackBerry. It was a smartphone, and it was the very famous smartphone in the 2007 and 2006 7 those period. And let's just um, learn about his childhood, like few things about his childhood. He was an electronic wizard. He was so much interested in researching a lot of things, and he was doing a lot of he was learning a lot of things in electronics, just like a scientist. He used to experiment a lot of things. He was also called as a science prodigy and presented a lot of in exhibitions, science exhibitions, and everything. Basically, he was a scientist. He always had the scientist mode of thinking, and he patented a device for reading the barcode for the movies in Hollywood. That's where he became so famous and recognized by the world when this when he patented this device for reading the barcode. So this is the background about him from childhood, and when he co-founded BlackBerry, so when he had the same scientist mode of thinking, and that's when he uh, invented this device. And he had this mind in his mind that he has to find the device to um, bring in that feature of sending out emails from the phone, which is easy. And before this, like the cell phone, we used to have only the number in the buttons. Like then he brought us this new model with the keyboards where we can type the email from the phone. So that was the basic the idea behind it, and then he developed this model. He was completely in the scientific mode of thinking. That's where BlackBerry became a huge success, and it was a big hit, and it was the first one of the first initial models of the smartphones out there. Eventually, what happened was when the iPhone, Apple launched their iPhone, the first iPhone. So that's when, like, when these people, like the people at BlackBerry, Mike and his team, when they were seeing that, they were saying, okay, they have put a Mac inside this small phone. What their thought process was, why, what is the need of putting that much processing power into this small device? That was one thing going on, and also the browser thing. They He believed that browser is going to take away so much of the processing power which is not required for a phone. So these were the things thought process going on in for them when iPhone was getting launched, and they were not convinced that it's going to be a huge success. But eventually, when iPhone was launched, it was a touchscreen phone, and it attracted billions of users for that appeal of touchscreen typing on a glass. So first, Mike was not convinced with this idea. He was resisting this idea of typing on the glass, and that's what was happening. And they did not think about the option of going with a touchscreen phone, while other competitors also jumped in and they were creating touchscreen phones after the Apple's phone was launched. So this was happening, and when in 2011, when they realized it was too late to rethink about this, because by the time almost everyone, like most of the market was shifted towards the touch screen. And that time what they thought was, they realized that they laughed, and why there is a need for putting a computer on the phone and it won't work. And by the time they came to that realization, it was 3 4 years late. So this was the story of BlackBerry and Mike. And here, this is the place where Mike and his team, they failed to rethink where that trend of touchscreen was coming into the market. They failed to rethink. Before that, they were all thinking, they were in the scientist mode of thinking, but at this point they were not able to rethink, and that eventually led to this failure. So key point key points to take away is, like, sometimes when we have more IQ, that can also become an hindrance to see and look for the things that we are missing out. This is one thing. We might be so sure that we don't know that we are missing something. And another thing is that if we lack the motivation to change, then we will miss a lot of opportunities. We'll miss a lot of opportunities, because even though we have a good IQ, like, we will miss a lot of opportunities if we lack that motivation of being able to change our mind. So that is one important lesson. Let's talk about Apple. What was happening in Apple? Let's go back before even the first iPhone was launched. The team was very successful with the iPod, and the technical team were suggesting this to the CEO. Then Steve, uh, That time Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs, okay, the idea what they were suggesting was, why not take this iPod and convert it into a phone where will have the music system as well, and you will have this as a phone as well. So they were trying to combine this idea, but Steve Jobs was not very convinced with that idea. He was saying, why would we do that? It seems absurd. He didn't. He was not convinced with that idea. But then they were. But that is the time when you know that in market we had all these cell phones, where even we were using all Nokia phone and all. Even we had music option to save for like songs and hear music. That was a trend. Maybe during that time this was happening in Apple as well. And then they, even though Steve Jobs was not convinced, he said, okay, he gave approval to the team to go and experiment, creating a model and experimenting it. And then eventually, when they had that model and when they showed it to him, and it evolved as a product as iPhone. So if they did not stop there, even though it was not convincing, they went into that experimental mode, and that's when iPhone was the idea of iPhone got stronger, and then they launched the product. And and you know that you would have seen the first launch of iPhone, that stage Steve Jobs was talking, was very interesting how he presented it. And this is an example of the rethinking. Same way they were able to like think another product, that iPad was launched, like putting the computer in a small tablet form. So that was the other idea, which also became a very huge success. So that is the point, and this was the story about the iPhone, and it became a huge success after the touch screen was hitting the market. People were really excited, and the trend of it changed the trend, and all the phones shifted towards the touch screen. So this is a good example of a successful story of being open and being thinking like a scientist and going with an experimental approach. And if you come, this is a pyramid which we can use it for our reference. And the excuses in an organization or in a business setup or even in our daily life, what are the excuses that we give for not rethinking? You know, the most frequently, most of the time, the excuse that we give is, this has been done this way. The way this has been is like this. Why we have to change it? And another reason we might give is, it is too complicated to overthink. It is too complicated, so we don't want to overthink. And another thing is like in our experience, what we have seen in our own experience, we want to go with that. And also we come to a conclusion that this will never work. So these are like the exercise, excuses that we give for not rethinking. And this is kind of a reminder, we can look at it. Coming back to this takeaway from the business stories, as well as the way of the learning from the scientist mode of thinking, we should not stop unbelieving. So that is the main um, thing. So it is actually, it is not just to affirm our beliefs, like where the purpose of learning is not to just affirm what we know already, but to evolve our beliefs, and not getting stuck at one place, and knowing more things, and not being sure that we know everything. We don't stop there, and keeping ourselves open to learn more. And that is what he says, that intellectual humility. Intellectual humility is like knowing what we don't know. In fact, the author goes to the extent that he suggests us to make a list of what all things we may not know, and then making that list will help us to become more curious, go and learn something more things about that. and it will also raise, when we also raise the question about our current understanding. Am I having a correct understanding about this? Also, it will increase our curiosity to seek out for more details and information and the evidence out there. And lastly, like this is also another point. This quote, we have heard this quote many times, right? It's a wonderful quote that knowledge is power and knowing that we don't know is wisdom. So knowing that we don't know is wisdom. So for that wisdom, he's asking us to do all these activities like trying to bring it to our knowledge that what all things we don't know. So that's very interesting activity to do. Okay. Now coming to the next topic, the overconfidence cycle and rethinking cycle. Here, when we know something, like we have that conviction, and then there is a cycle that we get stuck in sometimes. When even for that matter, like take success or something which we succeeded at in our life. If you can relate this to the example of BlackBerry phone, it's more easier. So when that success, so we get so tightly conviction, we have that conviction that we are right, and then we go get into this bias of confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is that where we look for the things that will make our beliefs more stronger. So we look out uh, for the details or information that will again ensures that we are right. So then we go to the validation and then it comes to the pride and we get into this particular cycle, and this is the overconfidence cycle. And another cycle is rethinking cycle. Here we have humility. We start with humility that we might be wrong, we might not know few things, and then that will raise a doubt, uh, and that unsure of this thing, few things, and then that doubt will again create the curiosity for us to learn or to know more, and then that will also lead to discovery, and this is the, it will come back to the cycle of humility, because the discovery will tell us that okay, I was uh, open and I was looking for the details that I was missing, and that's when we reach that point of discovery, and then it comes like a cycle. So this is a rethinking cycle. Sorry, every time I pronounce it, I say it wrong. Okay, this is rethinking cycle. So humility, doubt, curiosity, discovery. When I read this particular topic, it was little interesting because it related to me for a particular with a particular personal experience. So where like I'm an IT engineer, and when I used to do production deployment or pushing code to production, even though I've done a lot of checks like testing, validation, I'll always be having that doubt. Did I cover everything? Did I? We should go fine. Will it go fine? And all that. So I used to feel bad. Why I did all the checks, right? So I just need to be confident and push it. But I was feeling bad that I'm always having that doubt. But when I read this, it changed my mindset. I think that doubt is good. That doubt keeps us looking for the things that we are missing out. So in a way, it's good. I mean, in this, if you are thinking in a process of rethinking cycle, it is good. Having the doubt is good. So that was one interesting aha moment for me. When yeah, so I will come back to another example. Let's move on to this confidence sweet spot. There is a quadrant. So he is showing this in a quadrant to explain sweet spot of confidence called confident humility. It is the four quadrants: believing in yourself, here believing in your tools. So believing your when you are believing in yourself, you will be more confident. And when you are believing in the tools, the knowledge or whatever tools we have, that that has two categories of certain or uncertain. So when we are in this quadrant, confident humility is where we believe in ourselves, but also we have a little bit of uncertainty that gives some space for humility. So that is the sweet spot here. And the other one, like when we are so sure and we believe that it is going to work, this is the way it is, and we are so strongly convicted about something, then we go into that blind arrogance mode. That 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 was mode where like we might be blind um, to a lot of things, and also it will create a knowledge blind spot. We will not be even aware of what we are missing out, like the blind spot. And humility, he calls it as a reflective lens. It helps us to see things more clearly. And confident humility is, you can imagine it like just like a corrective lens, like when we are not able to see clearly, the corrective lens help us to see clearly, which helps to overcome our weakness. So the weakness he says is that arrogance or the overconfidence that we get at some point, that in order to overcome that weakness, this confident humility is the corrective lens. So this is example of the confidence sweet spot. And if you look at this particular quote he mentioned in the book, is that great thinkers always maintain doubts because they are always aware that we are partially blind to a lot of things, and they are always committed to improving their sight. And that is why they maintain the doubts, they take the benefit of doubt. And coming to the next topic is the Mount Stupid. So this is we all can relate this to. Even I can relate this to me with my own experience. Whenever we are learning something new, and at one point we have learned some amount, like we know a lot at one point, and then at that point we will feel very confident, and what will happen is like sometimes we feel that we know everything in this particular field, and we'll reach a Mount Stupid, this place called Mount Stupid. After this reaching this point, we will not be able to open ourselves to hear anything on this topic. Let me give you this maybe like a personal example. Whenever we are discussing about some topics with my friends or with my colleagues, right, some interesting topics will come up. What will happen is I have noticed myself that I get so excited about the topic and I start sharing, this thing, like whatever I learned something in my past. And then I later realized that, oh, I was sharing everything, like whatever I was knowing or in that excitement, but I did not pause and just listen, like what they were to say. Like they might have come started the topic to bring something new about it, right? So many times I have seen myself doing that many times, and this particular Mount Stupid is kind of very um, was an aha moment for me because I myself has done this many times, and now I this is a chance for me to change and open up my ears and listen. Even though I know something and I get excited and share a lot of things, this particular concept will make me a good listener, I believe. So that's what I felt when I was reading this, and very interesting. This is where we have to be very careful and not get stuck at that monster pit. And next one is the confidence versus competence. So this is about confidence versus competence. There are two different syndromes author talks about. One is the imposter syndrome, and another is armchair quarterback syndrome. So this is like, if you look at this graph, confidence versus competence, when the confidence is less than the competence, then we will be in this imposter syndrome. This is where we can see a lot of examples from our own life, like when we were a fresher in our career, or we were in college, when we were not so confident, we many of us we would have faced this imposter syndrome. And the other syndrome, the opposite spectrum, we have the armchair quarterback syndrome. This is where the confidence is more than the competence. So when we know something and when we become more confident, and eventually sometimes when we get become overconfident, we will fall into this armchair quarterback syndrome. There is a one middle space where, which is the zone of confident humility, where we are confident and also we have the humility, and we know what we know, and also that we know that we do not know few things, like we know what we know as well as we know what we may not know as well. So that is a zone of confident humility. When we are comparing these two, and this is a Venn diagram representing these two syndrome, author goes one step further and he says that imposter syndrome is helpful. Sometimes it is okay to have imposter syndrome, because it will potentially help us to learn a lot, since we are already in that uh, search of that knowledge, or what we are lacking in, we are trying to get that out, get that from out, whether it is from an advice as a feedback, or an advice, or reading something or something like that. And it is common, as I said, it is common when we are very less confident. Especially this example resonates more while giving a speech in front of an audience, because it is all, it is kind of puts us in that imposter syndrome. And coming to the opposite side, right, it's very the example he has given is very much real. You know, the when we are behind the wheel, I mean when we are driving, right, we always scold the other vehicles how they are driving, like when we feel like they are doing a rash driving or something, so we will scold the people on the road, right? So that is when we might get into this mode of armchair quarterback syndrome. And potentially, he says that this is potentially harmful for the reason that we might be so strongly sure, we have a strong conviction that we are not able to open ourselves to knowing more or understanding more. And there is a, like, the thing which is common to both. It's like both of the things are in our head, and both of the things are permanent. I mean, sorry, they are not permanent. We can change. That is the common. Whether we are in this spectrum or that spectrum, we can change. And we can see this in workplace. Like you can see examples for people acting in this mode of confidence, overconfidence, and sometimes a lot of people acting in this mode of lacking confidence or in imposter syndrome. So this is a good Venn diagram for helping us to understand further. Okay, so this, let's move on. This is the most fun part of this book, the joy of being wrong. The author is trying to explain this with a very good example of Daniel Kahneman. When I read this title, I was surprised. The joy of being wrong. What is going to be there in this particular chapter? So, when let's look at experience of Daniel Kahneman. So, whenever Daniel Kahneman comes across something from his colleagues or someone who's telling that what he has studied earlier is wrong, the reaction that you can see from Daniel Kahneman is like a surprising reaction and a delighted reaction response to that, because of the fact that he feels joy when he comes to know that he is wrong, because he feels that like a surprise that he's coming to know something new, and also he's learning something which he did not know a minute earlier. So this is the way he thinks, and it is kind of surprising, because we all have difficulty, right, when we are admitting that we are wrong. It is so difficult for us, maybe like because of that way of thinking from our childhood, or we are so conditioned this way that admitting, or like say like I mean admitting that we are wrong, or making a mistake feels so bad, right? But this chapter and this particular thing, it really will change our mindset and our approach. So he also gives the tip. Daniel Kahneman gives us some suggestion on how he is able to. He is joyful when he gets to know that he is wrong, because he says that he has detached his ideas and his study or his work and the beliefs that he has from himself. He's not identifying himself with his ideas and the study, whatever he has done. So when something comes new, he takes it as a, oh, okay, this part I was missing it earlier, and it creates a surprise and joy for him to add it to his own view of that particular subject. So this is the tip shared by Daniel Kahneman, and based on this particular tip, author has given us two different attachment that we have, to be aware of these two different attachments that we have, and then to how we can detach. So first detachment he's talking about here is to detach our past self from our present self. uh, what he is trying to say here is we have to consider a past version of ourselves, detach it, and then detach ourselves from the present version, because when we were doing something in the past, we have gone through some experience. So if we get at when we think if we are attached to that past experience and our knowledge, sometimes when we see something new in the present, we may not be able to, our mind may not be so flexible to check out the new things that we are missing out. And this might be like an example I can say as a person from an IT field. Like I've been working in this data side as a data engineer, and there are like new technologies comes every day. So if I'm not able to look at the present new technologies that are coming in with a fresh perspective, I may not be able to learn them, because I already have knowledge. I need to I need to unlearn. I need to detach that, and then I need to learn the new things. So that is all in the process of unlearning and then learning newly. So that will happen with this detachment. Another thing I could say is we all would have thought this, right? We would have thought, oh, 2 years back, did I do that? Yeah, was I so stupid and did this? Like we sometimes come across this kind of thought process, right? That is, if we come across that kind of thought process, that means that we have eventually have evolved. We have learned a lot of things in that during that time. So we are never the same like we were yesterday. So we are evolving, our beliefs are evolving. So detaching this will help us to have that mental, it is healthy for our it is a something that is mentally very healthy for us to have this kind of detachment. And another example which resonated on this particular topic was, you know, I have messed up a lot of things in my past. I have done a lot of mistakes. And when I was looking back, I used to feel very bad and guilty about it. So, this particular suggestion author giving here, detaching ourselves, this will also help me to forgive myself and learn from my mistakes instead of getting stuck there. So that was one thing which is connecting with this particular topic connected to that idea. And the second style of detachment he's talking about is to detaching ourselves from opinions and our beliefs and the ideas that we have. So we don't have to identify ourselves with our ideas. Today we have an opinion, tomorrow we have another opinion, and our beliefs keep evolving. Only thing we need to have close as a compass for driving us is our values, which are the things that always constant, you know, which we hold strong towards us. But the beliefs and ideas will come, it will evolve. That's why we need to detach it. So that is the one interesting point here. So these all are the things that was covered in this book, and towards the end of the book I have listed out the points he has given in the book, just like a checklist or a reminder we can look at to remind ourselves constantly to open our mind and rethink. So let me read out a few of them. Okay, the first point, individual rethinking. Think like a scientist. Define your identity in terms of values and not opinion. Seek out information that goes against your views. Beware of getting stranded at the summit of stupid Mount Stupid. Harness the benefit of doubt. Embrace the joy of being wrong. Learn something new from each person you meet. Build a challenge network, not just a support network, who can challenge our ideas. Don't shy away from constructive conflict. Regarding this conflict, I covered some of the topics from the book. There are like so many things out in this book, one of which I couldn't cover due to the time, considering the time, was about the conflict thing happening within a team or in a family setup where we might have a conflict on a task. He gives an idea of detaching the task conflict from the relationship conflict. Instead of the conflict being focused on the task, it should not go and impact our relationship. So that is the task conflict and relationship conflict. And the example he shared in the book was about Wright brothers when they were trying to build that aeroplane for the first time to fly. Both brothers had so much of different, they had so much of conflict while working together. They had, though they had task conflict, they managed to not have relationship conflict. So that was one example mentioned. Moving on to other points, interpersonal rethinking. practice the art of persuasive learning, questioning how rather than why. It was about like when you are trying to understand someone, you are trying to learn something from someone, or you can ask the question of how they are doing it rather than asking why. That question might feel a little hard to answer. So that is one idea he's saying, and let me read out that point. That will be a revision for me as well from the book. Just towards the end. Yeah. Interpersonal rethinking. Question how rather than why. When people describe why, they hold extreme views. They often intensify their commitment and double down. When they try to explain how, they would make their views a reality. They often realize the limits of their understanding and start to temper some of their opinions. So that is an interesting point. Question how rather than why. Ask evidence. Okay, ask what evidence would change your mind. Sometimes when we even for ourselves, right, we will believe in something so strongly that we were not able to change our mind. When we are put forth with this kind of question, right, what evidence will change your mind? Then we will think like so initially our reaction might be like, oh, uh, there can't be any evidence that can change my mind because I know this is correct. So that kind of reaction we might have, but that will eventually lead us to think, okay, what evidence will change our mind? Will open our mind to look for those evidence. So whether we can change our mind. So that's another question. Ask how people originally formed an opinion. We need to ask them how they formed that opinion. They might say, I heard it from a friend, I heard it from someone. Then they will rethink, oh, should I have this opinion just because I just heard it somewhere and not really, I mean, not did not research whether that's true, something like that. They will have curiosity to relearn that. Acknowledge common ground. This was for debating. Like he shared an example of debate and how people win in a debate, how they bring forth their point and win the debate. So there he was talking about common ground. We, whenever we go for a discussion or when we want to put a point before on the stage, we always want to like oppose the opponent point, but rather he starts by saying that we need to bring a common ground where the opponent and we are also having a common ground. Start from there and then take it further. That's one very good tip he shared here. Next, remember that less is more often more. So, and I think let me read out this point as well since I'm curious to revise. Okay. If you pile on too many different reasons to support your case, it will make your audience defensive and cause them to reject your entire argument. So instead of diluting your argument, lead with few of your strong points. This is also regarding the debate thing. When we are in a debate and you are trying to put forth your point, don't put forth so many supporting points. Just take two supporting points and make them strong points. That is one tip. Reinforce freedom of choice. Have a conversation about conversation. These are other tips. Collective rethinking. Complexify contentious topic. This is about there are some topics where we might have extreme opinions, right? I might have an extreme one in extreme opinion, another person might have another extreme opinion. So for those topics, we sometimes we just want to fall in one side, right? But what he is saying is to complexify and look at all the details. Like there are so many things involving in that. There are more than two sides to every story. Instead of treating polarizing issues like two sides of a coin, look at them through many lenses of the prism. Seeing the shades of gray can make us more open. That is about this thing. Especially this applies for having polarizing issues, for the polarizing issues and having like completely extreme views about some issues. Don't shy away from caveats and contingency. Expand your emotional range. Have a weekly myth busting discussion. So these are like a lot of other tips. And interesting thing was throughout the 10-year plan, he's trying to say here is that we might have a 10-year plan, but eventually we might change our plan. It might evolve. Our plan also might evolve. So in this particular topic, he says what interested to you last year might bore you this year. What confused you yesterday might become exciting tomorrow. Passions are developed, not just discovered. Planning just one step ahead can keep you open to rethinking. So, this is another approach for planning, towards planning. So, it is interesting. Schedule a life checkup, make time to think again. These are all valuable tips shared towards the end of the book. And while concluding the book, he also mentioned that he doesn't want to conclude with 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 all these things he has shared. He doesn't want to conclude like that, saying this is the best thing to do. He's open to rethink this again. Whatever ideas he has shared in this book, he's open to rethink again. And that's the way he has ended the book, saying that he's just not concluding it and letting these thoughts for you to start rethinking and having different new perspective, bring in new perspectives and growing and being a continuous learner throughout our life. So this is a very interesting book, and I really loved this book, reading this book, because for me personally, this book connected so much because in my past I had a lot of struggles. I had a lot of struggles in my past and situation where I was completely stuck in my mind, and my dad always gives this advice to me. He always tells me have an open mind, have an open mind from the time I was young. So this particular advice was initially I couldn't really make complete sense of what he's trying to say. I I have listened this advice from him a lot of time, but eventually I'm slowly able to understand what he was trying to say. And this particular book connected with that idea very closely, and it was connecting with me very closely as a person. So thank you so much for listening to me with an open mind to view and see from a different lens. I hope this will help you also to go and rethink a lot of things in your life, in your personal experience, as well as at your work. Keep rethinking and keep learning have fun learning, and even if we do mistakes, let's have fun and let's take it as a joy and learn from our mistakes and move forward in our life. Thank you so much for listening. It was a immense pleasure for me to sharing this book review with all of you. Meet you soon with another book review. Thank you so much. See you all soon. Bye.